A husband takes his wife golfing, and it's her first time, and he warns her, be careful. And so she makes a drive, and sure enough, the ball goes sideways, and it ends up hitting right through the window of a nearby house off the golf course. So the husband says, "I told you to be careful." He says, "Let's go see what damage we did." So he takes her up to the house, and they knock on the door, and from inside the house they hear a cheerful man's voice say, "Come on in." And they go inside, and there's a broken antique bottle on top of the piano, and the man standing there says, "How do you do?" And they say, "Very well, but we're really sorry. We broke your bottle and window." And he says, "Well," he says, "actually," he says, "I'm a genie." And he says, I've been trapped in that bottle for 300 years." And so he says, "But," he says, I'm capable of granting 3 wishes." And he said, "I will grant each of you a wish." He said, "But I'd like to reserve the last one for myself." And so they say, "Well, that sounds fair." So he looks at the husband. He says, "What would you like?" And the husband says, "Well, you know what?" He says, "I'd like $1 million a year for the rest of our lives." And so the genie says, "Granted." And he looks at the wife, and he says, "And what about you, my dear?" And so she says, "Well," she says, "I would like a mansion for us both." And she said, "I would like the mansion filled with antiques and furs, and just fine furniture and furnishings." And so the genie says, "Granted." And then he says, "Okay." He says, "Well," he says, "I've been trapped in that bottle for 300 years." And he says, "For my wish," he said, "I would actually like to take you," and he looks at the wife, and he says, "I would like to take you upstairs and have sex with you." And so the husband and wife kind of laugh, and they look at each other, and they kind of laugh, but they also say, "Well, you know what? He granted us each we're going to be wealthy for the rest of our lives and live in luxury." So the husband says, "I'm okay with it if you are, honey." And she says, "Yeah, I'm okay with it." So he says, "All right." He says, "Well, I'll wait down here." And so the genie takes her upstairs, and boy, they go at it, and the genie's he's insatiable, and he just all day long, all afternoon, or well into the evening, and she's like, "Wow, you're something else." And he says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, you're a beautiful lady." And so she says, "Well, thank you." And he says, "Well," he said, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" And she says, "No, go ahead." And he says, "How old are you and your husband?" And she says, "Well," she says, I'm 25, he's 30." And so he says, he says, "That old?" He says, "25 and 30, and you still believe in genies, huh?"